All right, well, let's call to order this meeting of the Cumberland County Finance Committee today, December 19th, 2023 at 5:05 PM. We'll do some quick welcome and introductions. I'll begin. My name is Dustin Ward, Select Board Member from New Gloucester. We'll go right around this way.
Bob Vale, Cumberland, Town Council.
Teresa Grover, Finance Director.
Alex Kimball, Deputy County Manager.
Jim Gailey, County Manager.
Patricia Smith, Commissioner.
Paul Trurag, Bridgeton, Select Board.
Excellent. Well, welcome back from nice, almost year hiatus, and a different time of the year too. So, any public comment that was received prior to our conversation tonight? All right, we always leave it open just in case. Well, then I'll hand it over to much better hands for presentation of our 2024-25 budget this year.
All right. Before I jump into a few slides here to kind of give you a snapshot of what we'll be working on, but at a 30,000-foot level, just wanted to update the Finance Committee on a couple of things. First, as you're aware, we were in a transition period of time over the last 18 months in which we created a 12-month budget and a 6-month budget. First, the 6-month budget all worked out well. January to June 30th last year. For the general fund budget, that was a 6-month budget, but we had our cross-insurance arena budget and the jail budget was a full-year budget that was ending June 30th. Both went well. Cross-insurance arena, I'm happy to report, turned another profit year. So that was good. Things are going well over the arena in booking shows on top of hockey. The transition took, it was smoother than what we thought. It was very tough, building a budget in August of 2022 that would last you to June 30th of 2024. But Alex crunched some numbers just within the last week and a half, and we're right on target in many of the cost centers, and really nothing that is raising our eyebrows just yet. The one thing that we are looking, keeping our eyes on, one is trying to get federal inmates back into the jail to get that revenue going again. And the second, as we all know how the housing market's going, well, that impacts the Registry of Deeds. But the deeds revenue is holding pretty much right where it should to break even, but we'll continue to watch that over the next 3 or 4 months because they tend to be the lighter of the 12 months over the next couple of months. So transition into the budget seems as though we pulled it off. Fingers crossed for the next 6 months that something doesn't go haywire on us. Then the last item I wanted to report out on, and you may have seen this in the newspaper, the county has gone and purchased a new building out in the North Deering neighborhood of Portland, over in a sense, the parking lot of where WGME Channel 13 is. That was after we had gone through a preliminary engineering study to place a new building down on our jail and law enforcement campus down off from St. John Street area. That preliminary design came back for a 22,000 square foot building. It was going to cost us $17 million. And it was unfeasible. It was going to be a down payment, and then it would be a lease purchase that we would be exploring, and it was going to be anywhere from $400,000 to $500,000 a year for 20 years to pay that off, and that was a non-starter for us. Luckily, the development team that we were working with, one was a realtor, and he slid a piece of paper across the desk to us and said, "Check out this building." And we ended up purchasing the 32,500 square foot building for $4.5 million. And we used opera funds to do it, our revenue loss account, and we will be outfitting it with opera funds, so there's no impact on the tax rate, and we will be saving upwards of about $250,000 a year by releasing 2 leases that we have down here in the Old Port. So it's a win-win for us, and we're thrilled that it not only gives us the space that we need, but it gives us a little bit extra, as the 22,000 square foot building was going to be tight from day one, I think. So all positive news with that regards. We're in design right now, and we'll probably be in construction, and then move-in day will probably be around this time next year for that building. So, a lot of work still ahead on that building. Jumping into the 2024-2025 budget. This budget was presented to the county commissioners last Monday, not yesterday, but a week ago, Monday. And the commissioners have remanded the budget to the finance committee for your review and recommendation. It is our hopes that over the next 2-3 months, we'll go through a series of meetings, preparing the finance committee to make a recommendation so that the commissioners can take this up again in March. Why that type of schedule? I feel it's very important with our new kind of budget cycle. It kind of jumps in and mirrors some of the budget cycle that you all work at, local government. And once you start getting into March and April, you start having annual meetings, and it's really good to have a number to the communities so that they can factor that into their annual meeting. So it's my hopes that we can finish up our budget process by the second week of March with the commissioners. A couple of budget themes this year. First is salaries. I don't think it's any secret that our region has really had a hard time on finding candidates for the empty positions that we have. I read somewhere that I believe it's a 2.4% unemployment rate. There's 2 jobs for every 1 applicant at this time. And for the first time, we're really, towns and government bodies are really competing against one another for those qualified individuals. Once you get them, you gotta retain them. And so, as much as it costs to get them, it costs just as much to make sure that those employees are happy where they are. They're paid a market rate wage and offered an attractive benefit plan.
What is your turnover rate?
Excuse me?
What is your turnover rate of?
Well, if I would say that within the jail, we're not doing so good. Percentage-wise,
Putting the jail aside or breaking it into the
yep,
the pieces.
yeah, it's tough. They come in waves, really. 5-10%. What we're seeing largely are vacancies occurring in the district attorney's office, trial assistants, and the jail. We've had a number of patrolmen and deputies leave, but we just hired on 7, I believe, in the last 3 weeks. And facilities, custodial, maintenance. Those are our 3 or 4 big areas that we are constantly cycling out employees and hiring new employees.
Any primary reason for leaving? Time, new job, retirement?
It runs the gamut. I will say the one barometer that I try to look at is, are we losing to other government bodies?
No.
And I would say no. I'm not hearing that individuals are going off to other government bodies. District Attorney's Office, they can go off to a local law firm, and they have. But other than that, I haven't, it runs the gamut. Some people just change careers.
Yeah.
I thought our dispatchers would be going off to other dispatch facilities. Not the case, maybe 1 over the last year. So it's a variety of different job paths. And the generation that's coming up through, they're not married, they're not looking at careers at this point. They work 3-4 years, they move on, if they get to that far. So it's a very fluid resume you read from the new job seekers that routinely we see them jumping from job to job to job. And Once they land here, we hope to retain them, but it's not always in the case.
Yeah, I think we're actually seeing the same thing. People are not going to other government jobs. And the people that are leaving us it's not an age thing. We've had people who are, you know, have been with the town for a while and they just move on to another job. It's in a different field.
We could generate some of those turnover numbers, not too hard. It might be interesting,
Yeah,
actually.
I would like to see them. I always like to see turnover numbers.
I would be curious because salaries are usually your biggest percentage of the budget anyways. So sometimes it's never just increasing the salary to hopefully keep. I think you're in a time where people want to retain and sort of figure out what are they good at. Very similar to how when I came into college, right? Try a bunch of different things. Well, now we're doing that in the job market. So it may not even be more salary means you're going to retain your member. It may be development within the job they have.
And
That's
with
different.
2 jobs for every 1 candidate, it's a lot easier. There's no barriers for them to jump and find out what they ultimately want to do.
Yep.
One of the other things that impacts the salaries and the benefit lines this year, and I'll merge those together, the union contracts. We had a number of union contracts that we worked on over the last 2 years. Knowing that we were entering a budget transition year, we kind of worked with the unions to negotiate salaries and, in particular, a main PERS increase benefit plan for year 2 of their union contract, which would be this budget. And so that's coming into the budget, not this current year, but next year. And so we had to account for that. And the main PERS were, the dispatchers are getting an elevated main PERS plan, and the patrol deputies are getting an elevated plan. Seems like software maintenance contracts, we are so heavily dependent upon different types of software in every department, 3 to 5%, if not a little more, on an annual basis lately. Holds true this year too. Fleet vehicles have gone up. The ability to purchase a $32,000 or $34,000 Ford Explorer Interceptor for the deputies, it's now like $45,000. Fitting up each vehicle used to cost about $12,000, it's now $19,000. So it adds up quickly. And it was quite surprising to look at the numbers in preparation of this budget on the vehicle side of things.
Do you keep like a spreadsheet of anything that shows like, you know, how many vehicles you have by department and their, you know, how old they are and their expected life?
Who has them? Are they on the road with a deputy? Are they with a detective? Yeah, we have to provide that once a year to our risk pool for insurance purposes. Just to give you some high-level budget highlights, we're proposing a non-union COLA of 3% in this budget. The Social Security percentage increase for the coming year is 3.2%, so we were just under that, and that's usually a barometer I use to land the non-union COLA. Health insurance increase, we're looking at 7% for our POSC and 10% for our PPO 2500 plan. We do have 1.25.
That's
1.5.
way over the rate of inflation,
What's that?
health costs.
Health costs, well, the health trust increase this year was 4%, but our mod ratings has increased it to 7% for the POSC.
You are correct. Come on.
The PPO 2500 was, again, 4%. Our mod rating increased it up. And then the PPO 2500 plan has been out of whack in pricing compared to the other plans within the Maine Municipal Employee Health Trust. So there was a little 2 or 3% bump on top of that to get it in line so that there's a 5% difference between each plan that the Maine Municipal Employees Health Trust offers. And so this will be the last year that that bump will have to be added to the 2,500. But that's why it's a 10% versus a 7%. Our two new positions, 1.5 this year. The one was from a directive of the county commissioners over the summertime because of the vacancies that we have had and the amount of applications that we are processing on top of additional work within the HR office. They added an administrative position in that office to help alleviate and push through applicants and go through interviews and process the necessary applications for the variety of departments that are looking for staff. The half position is a half position of our recruiter. Our recruiter is a full-time employee paid for by Opera, and we worked to hire that. When we hired that employee on, we looked at it as we're going to integrate it into the budget over the next 4 years, because at that time, we thought we could spend opera funds up to 2026. And so we were going to slowly fold that position in. Well, a month and a half ago, the Treasury Department notified us that any position that we currently have on the books has to end December of 2024, 2 years before our original game plan, which met the letter of the law back then, was to roll out. So we need to build in the back 6 months of the recruiter's position within this budget. We do have 2 other positions, actually 3 other positions, using opera funds currently. 2 of them fall in the public health office, but you've heard me say this in the past. Over the last 5 years, we've been building money into the budget slowly for the creation of a public health office. That money is paying off because now that's covering the public health salaries for this 6-month period of time. And then the last position is our compliance and audit manager, who will continue to be fully funded through opera funds through 2026. And that is the only position because she is specifically geared towards monitoring and auditing the opera funds. So she's fully focused on opera funds. So, but we will be working through her position eventually to fold it into the budget. But for this budget, 1.5 positions. A good news, part of the whole transition was to start whittling down on this tax anticipation note. Well, that's working. We are dropping ourselves from about a $14 or $15 million TAN this spring to a $8 million TAN. And that's going to be a decrease of about $70,000 in principal and interest.
While you're on that, in Cumberland, we finally eliminated having to borrow tax anticipation notes. And yeah, is there an ability for us to get into that position?
Yes. Yep, we have 4 more years after this budget. Right?
Less.
Less?
We're down to 2 to 3. We're ahead of schedule, and we'd be actually at the 3-year mark now, but fingers crossed. We're getting close now. We're actually $7.5 million is for the year we're in now. We're hoping for another $3 million drop for the next year, so.
So part of that is carrying a fund balance, and I believe South Florida has a 20% fund balance. It's amazing what the gathered there for extra money. Is there a limit on what the county can do?
Yes. What's tricky about this, and really this comes back to the whole point behind the fiscal year shift, the big problem that the county had wasn't so much the fund balance, it was that the property taxes were coming in 9 months into the year. So for the first 9 months of the year, we had to carry everything because there's that hard line of sort of the drop dead date of October 31st. If you don't pay by then, we start assessing penalties on towns. So we couldn't rely on any money prior to that, and having the year start January 1st, well, that's a lot of the year you're waiting. Now that the year is starting July 1st, we've shortened that window. That's really in many ways been the whole point of the conversion, and that enables us to carry a lower fund balance and not go way over our cap on fund balance, but still be able to manage this where A couple of years from now, we'll be able to pull out of it, and that's part of the prorated payment schedule. That was the whole point of this. And I think, I'm hoping we actually pull out a year ahead of schedule. And then, yeah, then we're done. We're not spending dollars on the interest, we're not spending time on the process, and we're not spending dollars on all the fees related to it. So that means the county as a whole isn't spending time and money on that. So, yes.
General obligation bonds, we're not proposing one this year. And other capital equates, non-debt capital equates to $376,000. So our tax rate impact is being proposed at 4.86%. Let's dive into the expenditures. County expenses are up just under $1.5 million, or 5.72%. I'm going to pause here and just talk a little bit about the jail. The jail budget this time last year, or the fall, we had to create a jail budget that we were able to move forward with and to bring into the 18-month budget because we needed everything together. That jail budget, as you know, you've heard me say that we're allowed to go up to a certain percentage. We factored everything together, and we felt as though we could move forward with the jail budget as proposed at the time last year. We revamped that jail budget back in this past May, before the beginning of the July 1st start date. There was no further impacts. We just, we really took a hard look at what the revenues were going to be and what we needed to do. Well, the revenues fell off the table because we had lost the federal inmates the September prior, 2022. And we really had to do some hard decisions in May to right-side the jail budget to reflect the loss of I think it was close to $2.5 million worth of revenue. We still have $1 million of revenue built into the jail budget this year. And our hopes are that we get some form of federal inmates back for the starting in January for the last 6 months. However, that what you'll see in the jail numbers is a lot of negatives because we had to cut a lot of revenue out of that budget. That just wasn't going to be reality. And we had talked last year about needing to right-size the jail budget because, one, we don't have as many inmates and we don't have the staff in the jail. So this is an attempt to right-size the jail budget. And so, like I said, you'll see a lot of negatives, and that's why we'll go in this direction. However, the jail budget, what you see today, the numbers that you'll see, is only factoring a 4% increase, and that's by state statute. We have really not touched the jail budget. We need more time to take a look at that, and we're hoping that through our process with you over the next 2 months, we will bring back the jail budget with better numbers and more reflective of what we think is going to happen start July 1st. A lot of that has to dictate whether we get the federal inmates back. But what you see here is a negative number. That negative number resulted in, I believe it was 26 correction officer positions we froze. We unfunded them this past May. They are still in the books, but there is no money behind them. And so that was one way of us creating a budget that we thought we could get through if we were able to get federal inmates back in January.
So can I ask a couple questions?
Yep.
As we go through the next 2 months, that concept of the federal inmates, will that become sharper? Or is that something that you'll have to wait a year to really see? You'll know that much more sooner in the next couple months.
There are two things happening with the federal inmates. The first is that we are working with the United States Marshal Service on negotiating a higher price per day. So we're in hopes of hearing, it's been past their deadline, but we're hoping to hear sometime in the next couple of weeks, if not month, of how our negotiations have yielded.
Okay.
The other is, I know that the jail major and the sheriff are working with the marshal service to see what it would take to get the marshal service to bring back some of the federal inmates for our jail. That their timetable is sometime in January. It's totally in the court of the marshal service at this point, though. Whether they think the jail is gonna be able to do what they feel is best for their inmates when they bring them back.
So the other part of the question is, if, what, and this is more intentionality of what you're trying to do, you're trying to do somewhat of a right size now, see where you're at, and then maybe next year continue that right sizing versus trying to do it all in one budget cycle. Is that sort of what we're seeing, is we're gonna try to better hone in now, give it the next year, and then come next year, okay, we'll do a little bit more versus trying to do it all this budget cycle, really right size it, get it as polished as ever, or is that
I
sort of?
think it's gonna be a moving target,
Yeah,
to
okay.
be perfectly blunt. I do not see unfreezing the 26 positions. I think those positions are still gonna have to be frozen. I just don't think we can make it otherwise. And we're not, in our hiring efforts, we're not butting up against the vacancy number that we have today. So there's really not a huge concern that we're gonna need to dip into those 26 or fund those 26 to get them on, because we're probably 25 or 30 vacancies away from that.
So, this is, I guess I'm trying to box for, we're not bumping up with excessive overtime in these positions,
We do. Yeah. There are, corrections officers are working anywhere between 1 and 3 16-hour shifts a week. And mostly are on the higher side.
So, I know at some point the analysis is bring another person on and reduce that gross cost. If you're not paying the overtime.
I'd love to bring more people on. We can't. For every 5 that we send off to the academy, once they get out, we probably are net 2. Just because it's been just a cycle.
We do have a hard cap on overtime, which is 72 hours a week, and that is enforced. But what it means is that a great many of them are near or close to that.
There's a lot of them that sign up for overtime so they can dictate when they do their overtime for, instead of being forced. So if they know they have something on this weekend with the kids, they'll sign up for overtime Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. So there's a little bit of maneuvering, but shifts are being covered. But on the flip side of that, we're off allowing them.
That overtime, if I understand, that plays out in retirement benefits too, which is taxpayer. I mean, I'm not saying deny people overtime, but there is a cost to that.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we're running way over on overtime. We run over on Main State Retirement, but because we're down physical positions, we run under on health insurance. So there's a lot of moving parts to it. But under all circumstances, just for the sake of just the quality of life of these people, more people, less overtime. Like, that's the answer. It's just getting there.
Jumping down to cross insurance. Cross insurance is gonna be a negative $90,000. So total expenses, with all that, those 3 cost centers or budgets put together, we're at a negative $520,801, or negative 1%. Jumping into the enterprises, we're under $2 million of new money on enterprise funds. Just over $1 million in grants, for a total expenditures for the 24-25 of $69,731,509, up just over $2.4 million, or 3.66%. Here is the jail expenses and revenues, as you can see. Majority of the revenues on the top are all negative, yielding just over 1.8 million negative in dollar change. We are not proposing any use of fund balance this go-around, as we did in the 23-24 budget. Total jail expenses are just over 1.9 million, and the total needs from taxes is the 4% as allowed by state statute of $614,226. Cross insurance arena, bond and principal is down 1.1, $1,100. Prior debt, just over $7,000. Operational is down 82,000 for a total dollar change of negative 90,197. Bringing those all together, total needs from taxes is $1.8 million, or 4.86%. Jumping over into the debt, capital, and tax anticipation note. As I previously stated, the tax anticipation note will be down 70,000. Principal's up 109. Debt interest is up 21,000. Capital reserve is up 78,500. In totality, all together, they're up $139,000, or 10.32%. And that concludes the slide deck.
Well, thank you. Questions from this group after everything that's been presented?
What are you gonna do long-term when the federal government money runs out? I mean, you mentioned, I think, in a couple of places, you know, you were building into the budget, slowly working in the fact that the money was gonna run out. I mean, I guess the flip side of that is it important to have continued growth in all these functions currently funded by the federal government, but at some point switched over to the towns? I mean, is that, seems kind of like you're getting the seed money from the federal government, and the towns, anywhere, you know, from 5 to even 10 years down the road, are gonna be faced with built-in escalating costs. And I mean, it's more of a general question about the role and scope of the county government versus the town government. You know, for example, the public health aspect of it is sort of a, you know, a new area for Cumberland County, and I guess I'm trying to understand, you know, looking at it from the town's perspective, as to whether, as to the value of that, and whether that's something, you know, that we would really be super excited about funding.
Well, the quick answer to that is that we have 4 employees that have some part of their salary paid for ARPA. Through this budget, or after this budget, we'll have 1 employee. The public health office, as you talked about, the 2 public health staff members that have ARPA built into their budget, we're taking care of 6 months of their salary within this budget, with already existing money that's been in the budget for the last 4 years. Really, after this budget, the only position left will be the audit and the compliance and audit manager. Other than that, we do not have any of the opera funds baked into this budget. The public health office, that's an office of 9 individuals right now, and it's all grants. We received a 10-year grant from the state of Maine Department of Health and Human Services, just over $1 million a year. And that is paying for 7 employees, actually 7.5 employees, within that department right now.
I guess I said federal government, but maybe I meant federal and state. combination of funding. So, you know, for example, if the state should change that funding, even though it's listed for 10 years, and we know the state has changed its mind many times on many financial issues, you know, what would be the response from the county? Would the county then say, oh, we have this department, and therefore we definitely need this department, and, you know, the towns need to fund this? Or, again, I'm just using that one as an example.
Sure.
Because it stands out as, you know, a fair number of people. Nine people is not.
Well, the grant has its specific responsibilities that we need to do to achieve the outcomes necessary for the grant money. If we lost that grant and it was no longer available to pay for the salaries, we would have to resize the public health office and not offer those areas that we're using grant money. Right now, the grant money is being used for behavioral health, obesity, smoking cessation. Those are all great and provide valuable resources to our region. But if we lose that type of money, those specific areas may not be able to be addressed within our region because of the loss of money. We have opioid settlement, but we're good with that money for the next 20 years.
Similarly, of those grants, while it is passing through the state, most of this is either other forms of settlement money. For example, their primary funding stream is tobacco for that, and that is coming from tobacco settlement money that is passing through the state to us. So, for example, if the state were to stop passing through that to us, they actually have an obligation to pass it to somebody. So it's not like the state can just be like, yeah, that tobacco number we're going to keep for ourselves. Similar with the substance use, there is what they refer to as HEAL. That is direct state funding, but that's actually by far the smallest of the funding streams. It's just an interesting thing with a lot of these grants that we've got going. They are grants that some of them are on 3-year cycles. But the likelihood of any of these particular ones drying up looks pretty small. Another one is what's called Cost Up. Oh, boy.
Don't try.
But it basically works on substance use issues down at the jail and helping folks get out of there. And we're at over 10 years of having that particular grant going. So, yeah, it's always a concern of what if these end, but we've really tried to focus on ones that are going to keep going. And what we're also finding out is these people in the public health department, by simply having them there, they're getting even more because there's a lot of opportunities out there, just needing somebody ready to go on it. But yeah, it's always a concern of, you know, anytime we look at these grants, is this something where the funding stream is going to dry up in 3 years and then we're there? Yeah.
Not so much a question, but as a comment. You know, I'm looking at the bottom line here. It's a 5%, basically a 5% increase over last year, $2 million increase in dollar value, a $40 million budget. And, you know, so I think the questions that, or the takeaway for me is, okay, what's the cost of a living adjustment made? You know, what is that? How does that? How much of that does it eat up? And then, but what my comment I'm getting for my bang for my buck. And so the one thing that I know that I'm getting is we've given you you're taking over our general assistance. And I said, okay, that's real value. That's I can come up with a dollar figure for that. But broadening that out a little bit, what are the things that the county is going to do in this operating budget to bring programming, consolidation of services to ease the tax burden? Because I think that's really the burden at some level, that's the duty of the county. It's to look at how can we save the community's money? What are we doing that we can do better than Dublin, North Yarmouth, Graven, Gloucester, Powell, et cetera, you know. Well, we had this discussion with North Yarmouth. I said to the folks in North Yarmouth, why don't we ask our two town managers to give us a proposal for the consolidation of the two fire departments? And it's like, you know, it's like from another planet. What? Well, we can't do that. I said, yes, you can. Ask them to come back in 30 days with a concrete proposal for the two councils to look at. Again, so I'm kind of going out on a limb there. I think the county, that's what I'm looking for, is for the county to take a leadership position and say, we want to help you do some of these things because it saves money. Talk about this. You look at the rest of the country, and they always work on county government. There's a reason they do that. New England is a large holdout of that, and there's, you know, we're all like home rule.
And you just hit the nail on the head. Yeah. And you're preaching to the choir, Bob. We 100% feel as though regional services can be done cheaper in a collaborative effort. We've proven it. We've proven it through our assessing office, with dispatch, general assistance. I can name, I keep on going. You know, I got hit last week about animal control. Got my head spinning a little bit on that one.
We're looking for an animal control officer.
Yep. So we will do whatever we can in support of the communities. The way we have been approaching it, though, is we've let the communities come to us. We're not gonna try to be seen as the empire builders here and kind of break in on that home rule, because that home rule is still pretty entrenched into the communities. But if there is a group of communities, much like for general assistance, they came knocking on our door and said, hey, we need help. And we have 7 communities doing, and we have 2 in the wings, waiting for me to get some more capacity within the GA that they want to come on board. So the structure's there, but we have typically approached it, we'll work with the towns, but the towns have usually been the ones that have raised it and said, hey, what do you think about this? And we've acted on it.
I mean, I think the other important thing is to charge the towns accordingly. So if a town feels that it can handle a function at either a cheaper level, or they want to invest more money in it and have more direct community control over it, then they don't want to be charged through this mechanism of the county government. I think, I'll speak for Bridgeton. I mean, there's a real concern about, what we're getting for the sort of bang for the buck, and particularly as we see, like, Portland and Westbrook. I mean, the original idea, of course, of the regionalization was that all these areas bonded together because they were too small to effectively cover some of this stuff. And now we look at cities that have reached the size of Portland, that have reached, the size of Westbrook, the size of South Portland, and, some of these functions, it seems like they might be in a position to handle them themselves. I mean, it's a mixed bag. There was an interesting article last week in the Boston Globe about Massachusetts, where they basically, back in the 1990s, really, eliminated about half, if not more, well, certainly more by population, but about half of the county government role and turned it back over to the towns. And it was kind of an interesting analysis of now that it was, 30 years later, what the plus and minuses of that was for the ones that did it and the ones essentially down on the South Shore of Massachusetts that didn't do it. And I would kind of urge you to actually read that article, because it was interesting, because once towns got to a certain size, there wasn't really that, like, yeah, we can't really do this by ourselves kind of thing. We're going to get some economy of scale. Well, suddenly when you're a town the size of Portland, maybe you can do some of these things more yourself.
Well, there's also a different dynamic that's being presented, is that some towns just can't do it anymore because there's not enough available staff to serve the needs.
Town of Raymond just passed a new ordinance that any new builds, you will require to put a sprinkler system in. And it's because they can't staff the fire department. So, as my lines are, we really need a regional fire department.
We are finishing up a regional fire and EMS study that the town's asked us to do. We used opera funds to pay for it. It's been a study that's been going on for about 7 months now. And it's on the tail end of being close to being finished. So, and that is taking a look at our region and making recommendations on how we can better work together in providing.
Don't show it to the fire chiefs.
So can I ask you two questions?
Yeah.
Because I asked my fire chief, and he said, well, maybe not the regionalization of the service, but what about regionalization of products, supplies? He said, start with toilet paper. Could you regionalize products, especially when it comes to the vehicles, where we would work with the county, especially as a conglomerate, we could work with the county to somehow offset the cost of so much of the product. So whether that's simple supplies or the vehicle issues, which we're seeing an increased
Vehicle
cost.
turnout gear, hose.
Right, all of that. So my question is, what would that, has there been consideration of maybe we start with the product? My secondary question is, in this budget, we had a lot of shifts in revenues such as the parking garage, communication contracts. You're finding alternative ways to add revenue. Have you thought about, is there other creative ways where down the line you say, if this could happen, this would be another creative way we can increase our revenues to offset some of these costs that we know are going to continue to increase? So sort of a two-part question.
I don't have any ideas on the increasing revenue side of things just yet. The only increase in revenue, and we've baked it in to some extent, is when we move out of this building, there'll be 40 new parking spots that we can
Yes,
sell.
right.
But at this point, the revenues, Maine is such a unique state, and you can only grab certain revenues and taxes in certain areas. And so, no. But we've always also thought that, there comes a time that you get a program that might be currently paying contracts from each town into it. If you get to that tipping point, when is the right time to just fold it into the general fund? And those communities who aren't participating are, in a sense, paying, but they're almost being forced to participate on a regional level. So, that's been a discussion in the past with the county commissioners. What is that tipping point that you fold a service into the general fund and no longer have it as a contractual service to the towns?
Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
I don't think there's enough numbers in here.
I'm sure they can find more numbers for you.
So you say that, we're taking it, I'm like, oh, wait, what? No, okay.
So, only two real pieces that, one I have a question on. So I know one of the things we consistently do is we always want departments to come in. Last year, we sort of fumbled that a little bit, but now that we're out ahead of things, be curious to think about which departments you'd like to have come in. I can think of the main ones that will. The other question I have is, usually, we've done in the past, we've gone budget by budget, asked questions. We can do overall questions continually, or we can wait for the departments to come in and ask specific questions if you have them on a specific department. So I think my first question is, which departments should we plan for a future meeting, given the 16th, 30th, and the 20th are upcoming meetings? So I'll entertain departments and as well. I'm assuming jail, cross insurance will definitely be on that list. Yeah, I figured. But is there any other specific ones that we would want? Ones that you have questions on that you are reviewing. he was
Well, the
saying-
sheriff as a whole, right, not just the JOP.
Well,
it's
yeah,
just-
I assume that the sheriff would come in and sort of answer to the full extent of everything.
One suggestion we'd have, if we were gonna do an all-in-one, we'd wanna make that later, so we have time to keep working on the jail budget, just because that, like we said, there's so much of what's making that a moving target is almost not really budget process, is just sort of the reality of the situation we're trying to adapt the budget to.
Yeah. So you're saying if you brought in the sheriff, or we had that conversation, that would be one you'd want to be a later conversation, hopefully maybe the February meeting, so you have more time.
At earliest, January 30th.
Yep, okay. Okay. Sheriff, Cross? Suggestions you all have, that would be good too.
Who's the director of emergency management?
Michael Durkin, he's been the director for a year now, just over a year.
I'd like to have one-on-one time.
See?
You want him to be here, or you said one-on-one time, so I didn't know if you wanted to meet with him specifically.
Personal questions you want to
I have one question I want to
Listen.
ask. No, I just think that, I think that's an opportunity to expose him to greater things. I'm not the county commissioner, but I am paying the bill, if you will, so I guess I want to ask some questions that will stimulate some program, consolidation.
Other thoughts? So emergency management additional. Was it last year or 2 years ago, we had dispatch come in? Maybe it's 2 years ago, because I'm remembering on Zoom, now that I'm thinking about it. So, that was the year too, that there was some shift, major shift, so I didn't know if dispatch was another. But we had them come in 2 years ago, if I remember right.
How much assessing are we doing for the communities? How many communities have their own assessors versus county?
6 communities, and none of it's, for the most part, in this budget, because it's all contractual.
So we did have county as assessing.
Yeah, we used to have 7, yeah.
That may change again, too.
Well, it's a bigger buy back in. Once you leave, then it's a bigger buy to get back in, yeah.
Town, don't ever leave.
Way in the world.
I can see I'll get a call from Bill Shane about 9 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Can't believe he hasn't called you right now. Any other thoughts? So I have sheriff, cost insurance, emergency management. Good.
Dispatch?
Curious if others feel communications. Let me look at my notes and see. Honestly, after that Zoom conversation, it seems, the budget seems to reflect that things had calmed because COVID had shifted so much of the call volume. But now I don't know if it's reshifted back to being a bit more settled, but let me just see if there's notes that I had. And I don't know if anybody else had questions on that.
Communications was a department that went through a phase of a ton of turnover during the year, but has come out on the other side of that, fingers crossed.
Yep. Yeah, I had some questions.
So, a lot of these services that come out of county, you kind of have a way to get into municipalities, kind of through the back door. And human resources, HR stuff. Is there ways for us to offer smaller communities some of those services, particularly with hiring, stuff like that?
We looked into the hiring, and that would be a little problematic in two ways. One, we are so inundated with applications that we receive. The second, the software platform that we run it all through is very specific with all the templates of the county, and to insert another community, because we had this discussion with managers about 4 months ago, we can't do it. And it would be another platform, but we just don't have the capacity, because of our own needs, we don't have the capacity in that world of the recruiter or the admin in the HR office to fulfill more.
So that
We wish
is-
we could.
The next question, you just mentioned IT, is there ways for us to use IT people for other communities?
We have always made it available for both the HR and IT, that if there are questions asked and need for guidance, that they're absolutely welcome to call and ask our IT staff or our HR staff, so that, you know, a lot of times, a manager might pick up the phone to the town's attorney and ask an HR question. Well, that can now, you know, I shouldn't say now, it's been offered for probably 4 years now. They can call our HR office and ask that same question and not have a bill at the end of it.
Right.
The same holds true for IT. That's been something we've been offering the towns for at least 4 or 5 years.
But we have software licensing and fees and that sort of thing. Is there opportunities for consolidation there and throwing darts at the board?
Yeah, I don't know. It depends on the software.
If there was, maybe there's an impetus for people to use common software.
Well, and a good example of that would actually be Dispatch and Spellman. Our IT department, actually, for all 3 communities, has hands in assisting with that for either the departments or the dispatch centers, maintaining that and also maintaining, to a certain extent, not so much the physical radios, but making sure that that dispatch end of things stays working. I hear it all the time from our IT director or one of the other ones. So I'm heading off to such and such town to fix an issue. So we're doing that a little bit, but it's just a small piece of the puzzle right now. But yeah, it's just every single one of those has to be looked at as its own unique set of issues.
Got any room for solar panels down on your new building?
Yep.
Yep.
Wrote a letter to the condo association the other day, asking for permission to put them up. We have an $88,000 federal grant from the Department of Energy for the solar panels.
If you don't mind, I'll tell you what questions I have, and if you can't answer them, then I would definitely want communications to grow. So my questions are, all amounts in 2023, what was handled for service, how many were answered for 911, how many were inadvertent hangups or false alarms, the type of calls, what type are they seeing, and then the others are budget specific. So, if those numbers that
We
you
will be happy to invite the director here.
Okay, I thought so. So then, yeah, I wouldn't mind communications coming in just to hear, because in the back of my head, I still remember our Zoom conversation. A year has now passed, like you're saying, they're coming out of it, so I'd be curious where they're at.
Well, and it's funny, that's a set of numbers that actually, for the annual audit, right about this point in time, usually, I'm grabbing from them through the, well, no, not this point. Typically, we do that for the annual audit on a calendar year basis. We've just shifted. But it would simply be her doing it through 2023 again, just like she typically does this point in time, most years anyways. If you were to look at prior year's audit, I can definitely send that page to you. You can see exactly what you're asking for, actually broken out over 10 years.
Yeah, because the stats were in for 2022 and 2021, and I was curious what had been seen up through, since we're in the end of 2023, if those numbers were there as well, so, yeah.
I know yesterday's call volume was 783.
Okay.
It was a very, it was a very busy day.
Yes, oh, I'm sure, I'm sure. Excellent. All right. So I have Sheriff, Cross, Emergency Management, and Communications for the next few meetings.
That sounds good.
Sounds good. Do we want, Sheriff can either be the 30th or the 20th, really is what you're hoping for. And maybe the 20th would be even easier, because that would definitely give you almost an extra month. Or is that, or, depends on his schedule, I guess. That's the other thing.
And typically you folks use that meeting as the,
Wrap
The
up.
final wrap-up.
Yeah. Then I
Let's
would,
shoot for the 30th of January.
okay,
I
that's
think,
fine.
I think once we get into January, we, hopefully, we're hoping, fingers
Yeah.
crossed, that we'll have a clearer picture knowing what the feds are doing.
Gotcha. So then, next meeting, could we do Cross and we do all three of them? Or is that an overload?
The cross budget, as they put it together, typically isn't done until March. And we felt comfortable moving forward with this budget process because we only deal with the operational side of it, and it was a number that's going down. And really, the number that's in there for operational, it's twofold. It's a small amount of money for if the Senate doesn't meet budget, and it's also through our contractual obligations with the management company, we have to, there's an incentive. If they meet certain goals throughout a year, there's a benchmarking that's been done, and there's a incentive payment that needs to be done. So that's in there. But to see that he's proposing 120 events, and he thinks his per caps are going to be $16 a patron, that won't be ready until March or April. But it would have no bearing on the budget numbers that you see today.
Right, those are pretty much fixed because of what you already know.
And we allow him to get as close to the fiscal year as possible, because he's, in a sense, a crystal balling it. He's saying, I'm gonna bring in 120 acts, but I don't know where they're coming from just yet. And then he works like hell the next 6-8 months to put acts in that arena.
But the operational budget includes some estimate of the incentive fees, correct?
Yes.
So is it worth even having them come in, or, because as you're processing out, everything's pretty much set in stone, for the most part, with what you present. There really is no variance, there really isn't anything that we would.
what's interesting about the cross insurance arena is it's not so much the budget, it's how well they're doing against the budget that affects the rest of the county. And there's great news on that front, and that they're being really creative and really successful, so, yeah.
You can bring him in and ask him for an update on how things are going and what he sees coming forward, and, there's a lot of emotion at the cross insurance arena. There's new, previous budgets have allocated capital for a new speaker system.
Right.
New hockey boards and glass. There's gonna be a complete bench flip. The penalty boxes are going the other side, the benches are going the other side. We're doing some reinforcement of the steel beams and the roof trusses next summer.
Okay.
So there's a lot in motion at that arena, over and above just talking numbers.
But all those changes are already funded, or they're in this operate?
No, they're already funded.
That roof structure, is that related to environmental change?
No, it's actually, it was brought to our attention, we had Cirque du Soleil working with us back in September, and they had a certain threshold that they wanted to be able to hang things off the roof structure, and we could not give them a good number, and so we had to go through an engineering study. And the engineering study showed a winter weight load and a summer weight load. It ultimately got them in, they're coming in June. But at that time, in looking at the roof structure, there was some attachment points that we could bring in different types of shows if we had just put another beam here and another beam there. So it's not a big project, but it's a reinforcement and additional beams to hang equipment from for different types of shows. Especially the shows that we want to do a more quaint feel. A couple of years ago, we purchased a half-house curtain that runs, so we can bring that show right into like a quarter of the house with a half-house curtain, and you don't see the back of the arena or anything like that. To do that, there's not a lot of attachments, because it was, the original arena was designed for attachments for rock shows at one end of the arena and call it good. As we move up the arena, there's less attachments. It's about a $60,000 job. And I was a little scared of what that was gonna cost. And,
Yes. Yes. Can you repeat? Yes.
All right. Well then, if you all say what's going on, how's it going, certainly do that. Yeah, all right. So yeah, if he wants to come in.
oh, he'd love to come in.
Yeah,
He's already asked.
okay, so then wouldn't want to hold him back, so. All right, and then in that same meeting, do we want emergency management as well? And sort of coalesce, do two things at once, or does that work?
You could probably do all three.
You could
Yeah.
probably do dispatch, EMA, and cross.
And then sheriff on the 30th, yeah, all right, then I'm good with that. Good.
EMA has a lot going on, but as overall budget, it's a relatively small one. So I think, it sounds to me like you'll be more conceptual in future that you'd be asking about, so.
I think so. All right, so with that in mind, any other business we want to take care of? I'm very cognizant too that we're missing one, so I don't want to get too far in with questions, because I know that Lee would probably want to provide his own, so I'm open to that being good. We'll adjourn and be prepared for the 16th. Good, any other thoughts?
Nope.
All right. Excellent. Then we'll adjourn at 6:12 PM. Thank you all. Have a good
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.